Hey everyone, welcome to Video Game Experience, VGXP. My name's David, and today we're going to be taking a look at a little program called UEVR. Now, it's not that little, it's actually quite big, and it's really been leading the charge in the PC VR space for the past couple of years now. I decided I'm going to try and do this video a little bit differently. I wanted to give you guys just my straight up impressions and really just some unfiltered thoughts on the program after playing around with it for the past couple days here. So right off the bat, I want to make it totally clear. I am the farthest thing away from a professional when it comes to programs like this, specifically UEVR, and just modding in general. I have never, ever modded in my life. This was the first time I've ever played around with anything quite like this. I think the most I ever did was I downloaded the Yippee mod for Lethal Company just to play with some friends, but nothing ever this game-changing. So no, this video is not necessarily a guide or anything like that. In fact, probably half the things I do in this video, you should straight up do the opposite. But at least you'll be able to see some of the pitfalls I ran into and some of the funny experiences that came from me making mistakes while trying to set up and use the program. So I think it's really important that I first outline what UEVR actually is. And I imagine most of the people coming to this video are super well versed in the world of PC gaming and modding in general, but I just figured in case there's someone that comes to the video and hasn't tried or maybe has been eyeing using UEVR for a while now, I just kind of wanted to provide a bit of a premise. So essentially UEVR stands for Unreal Engine Virtual Reality, I think. At least the idea behind it is that any Unreal Engine game that you own on the flat screen, whether it be through Steam or something like Game Pass on your PC, you can actually take it and inject virtual reality into that game. Now, most of the time it's not just VR support like you would find on an actual built from the ground up VR game. Usually it's something a little bit more like a VR camera. You'd be looking through this VR camera behind your regular third-person character. Now, most people could stop right there. That might be enough to satisfy many players and give them an even more immersive way to experience some of their favorite games. But some modders have actually taken it a lot farther and have created things called profiles. For instance, we all know that something like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is primarily, or actually really just only a third-person video game. But through some insane talent, some modders have been able to add actual motion controller support, which means you can swing your lightsaber around, use your hand to push and pull and use the force, and it's really quite amazing when it works, which is, we're gonna get to that later in the video. Also, before I actually dove into any of this, I was always under the belief that modding usually would just introduce more problems than it would solutions, and I figured the amount of time that you would have to invest in actually setting something up to work would just not be worth it. So that's kind of where I was coming from before I actually dove in. But enough about that. Let's get into what actually happened. So first things first, just as you would trying to learn something new, I typed in UEVR into my search bar and just checked out what would pop up. I eventually got brought to a GitHub page. I noticed on that page there was two different builds for UEVR that I could download. One was titled Stable, while the other was Nightly. Originally, I figured that Stable was kind of just the way to go. It seemed like it would avoid any unnecessary crashes or any experimental features that I really wouldn't want to have to deal with on my first time setup. So that's what I downloaded. While that was downloading, I also noticed they had a Reddit page. This Reddit page was just full of great material, including documents on how to properly set it up, which I just completely avoided. I'm pretty stubborn. I wanted to see if I could figure it out myself. And I mean, that was probably a bit of a detriment, but we'll get to that. Also on this Reddit page, there was a huge master spreadsheet, and it was just a massive list of all these different flat screen games and some recommended settings, including how compatible they actually were with the program. This is an absolute must when it comes to setting up games for the first time. You're gonna notice you're gonna run into some really crazy and just mind-numbing problems, but most of them can just be sorted out by applying some of the settings that show up in this spreadsheet. Definitely recommend checking it out. Also, I was able to find this website that contained a bunch of different profiles like we mentioned earlier. These profiles were for specific games, and some would introduce fixes, while others would actually introduce full new control schemes, including that 6 degrees of freedom that I was talking about. I kind of made myself a bit of a rule. If a game had a profile, and it had good reviews, and it seemed to be trusted by the community, I would be sure to use it. Just as the document specified, I first booted up the game, and mind you, I already had my PSVR 2 set up and running in Steam VR at this point. Then, once I got to the title screen, all I did was I hit the inject button in the UEVR program, and voila! I could see the game inside of my headset, and it seemed to maybe be working, but my hands were way in front of me and things just didn't seem quite right. Yeah, sure, I was able to walk around and swing my arms, and that seemed to be kind of working, but it was just strange. My camera was way behind me, my character way in front of me, and I made sure to recenter in the UEVR app. I started to wonder if it was a bit of a compatibility issue. And then came the crash. And can you guess how it crashed? Well, it was because I tried to kill the adoring fan. How else would that happen? Who would have thought? I stepped up on him, took my sword, swung it across his head, and my computer crashed. Amazing. Although I would call this probably my first failure when it came to trying UEVR, it was hilarious nonetheless. I tried a couple more boots of Oblivion Remastered, but I just really did not notice a difference. So I figured it was time to try a different game. And that's when I tried the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. And stop, we already failed. That game is not Unreal Engine. I spent way too much time playing around with this before I realized that it wasn't. I pivoted. Crash Bandicoot 4 it is. For this one, I didn't install any profiles. I jumped right in, and it just worked. This actually brought me back to the feeling of playing something like Astrobot. I was shocked how well it worked. Everything looked crisp and clean, and I didn't have any big performance issues, a couple visual artifacts, but that's kind of standard for something working this kind of magic. I felt like it kind of enhanced the gameplay in a way too. I was able to see boxes that I wouldn't normally be able to see around corners or over little ledges. Overall, I just noticed my immersion went through the roof. I spent way too much time playing this. I kind of just lost track of time, honestly. I was having so much fun in Crash Bandicoot 4 with Unreal Engine VR. Eventually, it was time to move on. And I decided, you know what, I'm feeling good. I'm gonna try a bit of a bigger hitter. I tested out Hogwarts Legacy. I did choose to skip out on setting up a profile again. I wanted to just get things working before I started digging deeper into the profile stuff. So I decided to just inject it normally again. And kind of like Oblivion, it was a bit of a mess. I had light problems, everything just seemed to be going wrong, and I would play in the graphics settings for at least 10 minutes per game, adjusting things like making sure VSync was turned off, HDR was turned off, but nothing seemed to fix Hogwarts for me. My controls were all over the place when I did get it working. Pushing the stick backwards would make me go forwards, and it was just overall a bit of a mess, so I kind of would call this one a fail again, but don't worry, we do come back to this one later. And unfortunately, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order gave me the exact same problem. And again, like how I set up Crash Bandicoot 4, I tried to do this one without a profile just to see if I could get it working from a third-person perspective. But just like Hogwarts, I was having lighting issues again. Honestly, at this point, I'd pretty much spent more than a couple hours trying to get this set up, and I was noticing more failures than successes, so I decided I needed to take a step back. I restarted my computer, I made sure hardware accelerated GPU scheduling, I think that's what it's called, HAGS. I made sure that was disabled because I know that sometimes that can introduce some problems in VR programs. And honestly, I was feeling quite discouraged, so I decided it was time to look for some outside help. Enter the Flat to VR modding Discord. Here you can basically find all the most up-to-date information and profiles for UEVR in general. I really should have just started here. First of all a lot of people were recommending downloading the nightly version of UEVR. And I definitely thought the stable version was going to provide the most, well, stable experience. But that fixed all of my problems. Honestly, as a newbie, I'd pretty much say joining this Discord is kind of a mandatory step. There's tons of different lists and threads basically for different games, and it includes all of the most up-to-date profiles, including some really cool features like the 6 degrees of freedom. At this point, it was getting pretty late and I was feeling pretty tired, but I decided I needed to follow through and complete this. So I deleted everything that I'd done so far, all of the files, and I restarted with the nightly build, including some really cool profiles for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Hogwarts Legacy, Stellar Blade VR, and Chronos the New Dawn. Feeling renewed and rejuvenated, it was time to give this another shot. It was time for round 2 with the sucker, and I wasn't about to let it win. So I booted it up, got it going, installed the profile, hit inject, it worked. 0 issues, no lighting issues, nothing like that. I had a wand in one hand and I was able to basically just play the game fully in first-person VR. I should mention that a lot of these newer games are gonna require a really beefy PC. My PC has a 7900 XTX in it, and even then, I would say it was struggling quite a bit. I'm lucky enough to have pretty good VR legs and not get motion sick, so I feel like I was definitely tolerating some low frame rates that most people would struggle with. Basically, as long as you can accept the fact that you're probably not going to be able to play these games on ultra settings like you would on the flat screen, you shouldn't have very many problems. You'll probably be sticking more towards the low to medium range, but for games like Crash Bandicoot that are a little less demanding, you could definitely probably hit high. Honestly, this one just blew me away. I was able to walk the Hogwarts halls, walk through the Forbidden Forest, and I didn't even feel like I really needed to progress in the game. I was just happy looking around. The wand was great and all, but that wasn't even the best part. It was honestly just actually living in the world, which was my favorite part of the game on the flat screen. But obviously this enhanced that tenfold. Same story for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. There was something about the nightly program that just kind of made it work. I don't know what it was. I mean, I'm guessing probably most of the profiles require a newer version of UEVR to work, but I was honestly just pretty shocked at how easy it all became. It went from being totally impossible and feeling completely helpless to basically becoming plug and play. Mind you, there were still a lot of issues with these profiles. Like, for instance, by the time I got to my play with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, I killed my companion about 6 times trying to figure out how to actually pick him up with the Force. Once I actually got to a Stormtrooper part, my lightsaber wasn't really working properly, and there came a part where I was supposed to start blocking bolts with my lightsaber, and the Stormtroopers just wouldn't shoot. So there was kind of a bit of a progression bug there. Really cool to look around the world. Definitely not how I would choose to experience the game for the first time though. Next up was Stellar Blade. I'd never actually played this one before, so I wanted to see if I could get the demo working. And what do you know? It worked. This one I did have a profile for. It said it made a couple fixes, but generally I was basically just playing this one with a virtual camera and a gamepad. This one was so much fun. It worked out really well, and I only had to turn down a couple of graphic settings. I just had no problems with it. One of the starting cutscenes looked a little funky. I mean, I started over top of where I really should have been, but by the second cutscene, it just felt great. I felt like an addict at this point. Every single game I was trying out was working. And just like Stellar Blade, this was actually my first time playing Pal World. And it was actually quite a good experience. I mean, the profile I downloaded wasn't super in depth. It's not like I could see my hands or anything, but I was able to actually pick things up and kind of move them around. Same with picking up my pals, and I could actually swing them around and stuff. I caught a Pokemon and we just took on everything that we possibly could on easy difficulty. And I also ended up feeding him mutton, which, I mean, I think is technically cannibalism, but he loved me for it, so I gave him some more. And I just kept going. I wanted to try some games that might give it a bit of trouble, so I popped in Tony Hawk. And once again, it worked. I just had to turn off VSync to fix some frame rate issues, but other than that, I was totally fine playing in third person. Funny enough, I actually noticed sometimes I thought it was a bug, but I was able to move my camera around the space, almost like a bit of an offset. So I figured, why don't I just use that to try and see if I can artificially implement first person mode into Tony Hawk. It didn't look great, but it did work, and I mean, it's kind of serviceable and cool when you get some airtime. It's definitely maybe not the intended way to play, but I thought it was pretty cool nonetheless to have that option. The last profile I actually decided to check out was for Chronos: The New Dawn, a fairly new game, and it was also just for the demo. So this was not the best experience. First off, trying to get through that starting cutscene was a real mess. It was giving me migraines from all the lighting issues and flickering, and I had to just close my eyes till it was over. But once I was actually in the game, it seemed to be working quite well. Although the performance just wasn't there on my rig, and it was just way too stuttery to actually be enjoyable. But I did manage to get the gun working where I could use my hand to actually move the gun around in first person. But overall, it just felt a little too janky for my liking. And I figured since it was such a new game, they probably just need a little bit more time to work on the profile itself. I then decided to reboot it without a profile just to see how well UEVR could inject into really just any kind of game, and it worked perfectly. I was able to play Chronos in third person with a virtual camera following my character. This was really enjoyable. I kind of like Crash Bandicoot, I just lost track of time. And I ended up just playing this one for probably about an hour. I was feeling pretty confident with myself at this point and kind of feeling like I got a pretty good grasp of the technology. So I decided to recheck Oblivion, but this time using one of the profiles off of the Flat2VR modding Discord. This worked. And let me tell you, this was probably the best UEVR experience I've had. All of the menus were in VR, the character creation was in VR, all of the buttons worked. I mean, I had trouble figuring out how to access my inventory. I do find it a little confusing when you see certain buttons on the screen, but they're actually mapped to different buttons on the VR controllers. It's not a big deal, especially because this is a free program. It was basically like playing a slightly less refined version of the Skyrim VR mode, the official one, which I mean, to say slightly pared back, that's pretty good. I was really able to do anything that I would have wanted to do, including shooting a bow. It worked just how you expect it to. Swinging a sword. I was able to grab a katana, swing at enemies, and they'd actually react in the way I'd expect them to. To finish things off and to celebrate Halloween, I decided, let's give Little Nightmares 2 a try. The footage speaks for itself. It worked. And the only issue I noticed was, I find Little Nightmares is actually a really immersive game. But with UEVR, you're kind of able to see around what the developers really intend you to see. And I found this extremely noticeable in Little Nightmares, since it's more of a 2D, 3D game. So I feel like being able to see outside of the environments kind of actually hindered the immersion that I usually get from this game. If I was staring straight on, it was really immersive and it worked really good, but I found overall I might have still preferred to play something like Little Nightmares on the flat screen actually. But honestly, all this did was just make me quite excited for the official Little Nightmares VR game that's going to be coming out soon. Those were all the games I actually played, and I think it's important that I leave you with some kind of final thoughts and just my overall impressions of the entire experience. Firstly, if you're not familiar with modding, and this goes without saying, just follow a guide. I'm not sure if most of the guides would mention using Nightly Build as for the first time, but I definitely recommend it. Secondly, I think a lot of people sell UEVR as this end all be all for PC VR. You know, it's the thing that we need to keep VR going, to keep it afloat. I don't know if I agree with that. I do think that UEVR plays an important role in VR's future. It just provides some of these games with exposure that they otherwise wouldn't have, and maybe some of the developers are able to see these VR modes and consider implementing an official one in the future. But I think overall, it's more of just a supplement to the built from ground up VR games that we're already getting. I still think that we need official VR modes to keep VR going and to keep it healthy. I also think that if you're someone who really enjoys tinkering with things, you can have hours and hours and hours of fun with this, and you probably won't get as frustrated as I did. But I think if you're someone who, you know, is used to console VR, just likes to turn something on and for it to work, I don't know if I'd recommend checking this out quite yet. I certainly wouldn't say go and buy a PC just for UEVR. I definitely bet there's some people that have done that and they've gotten tons of great experiences and have really found that purchase worth it. But I think you should really be buying a PC for VR if you already have some games on there that you're looking to experience, and then use UEVR as just that little extra sprinkle on top. As for me, I don't know how much more I'm going to be exploring this program. I think maybe if there's certain platformers that I'm really interested in, I would 100% consider playing through the entire game in UEVR. But I think for anything else, especially these games, these third-person games like the Silent Hills or maybe even the Resident Evils, I would turn to more official mods or probably just playing through the whole game on the flat screen first. So do I think it's the future of VR? No, not necessarily. Not by itself. Do I think it's magic? Yeah, kind of. It really actually kind of is. And I mean, finally getting your first game to work after tinkering for, you know, at least an hour feels absolutely amazing. Even though I don't necessarily think it's entirely for me, I'm going to continue to support these developers and modders because I think they're doing amazing work. And what they're able to accomplish on their own is an absolute testament to their skill, and really shows what these AAA studios could do if they just chose to dedicate a little bit of resource towards adapting some of these VR modes to their games. I would say overall, this was a good experience. Maybe not something that I would spend too much more time in, but really something that I would consider checking back out in the future after a couple updates. But we've rambled on enough. That's going to be all for today. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. And if you enjoy what we're doing here, please consider hitting the subscribe button. We'd also love to continue the conversation with you down in the comment section below. And with that being said, thanks so much for tuning into VGXP today. We hope to catch you around in the next video real soon. See ya!